Hello and welcome. Today we're going to be taking a look at Hearts of Iron 4. Believe it or not, this game has got 4 times more players than when it launched. The only problem being is it's a very complicated game, so today we're going to be trying to make it as simple as possible so that you can dive in. So we're going to be taking a look at things in a logical manner. There's no point in learning about your army, navy and air force until you learn how to supply them properly, and that is done by managing your economy and production lines. So the first thing that we're going to be taking a look at, so you understand some of the concepts later on in the other tabs, would be the production tab. The production tab is basically where you build guns, support equipment, trucks, tanks, aeroplanes, boats, submarines, convoy boats, everything that you're going to need to win the game. This is where we choose what to build with our military factories. I currently have 2 production lines, one creating basic infantry equipment, one producing support equipment. They're both using 1 factory each. But if you look up here, it says 3 military factories. This means that I can add on more military factories to a single production line, or if I chose, I could add in a completely new thing to build if I wanted to build tanks and focus on that. If I wanted to, I could set more factories than what I currently have to build if I roughly know what I want to build. But bear in mind, if you're going to use this technique, it's going to go to the top line, so it'll go to basic infantry first, support equipment, early truck, support equipment. It'll always go from top to bottom when the factories have been built. Military factories use a system called production efficiency. This is basically how good your factory is at making the production line that you've selected. The green bit is how efficient your factory currently is. The red bit is how efficient it could be. There is a cap on efficiency. They can only get so good at making that one particular item. But there is also something called production efficiency growth, meaning that you will get better and better at making the item over time. So whatever item it happens to be, it'll slowly build more and more and more as your factories get more efficiency at producing your production line over time. You can see the number going up. That's basically what it does. You can also see on this tab how many you have in surplus or deficit. So you could see my support equipment. It's got 29 being stockpiled for future units. But then my basic infantry equipment needs about 1,200 more just to reinforce the units which I've currently got out on the map. Over time, you're going to research better and better equipment. So as you find this button popping up, outdated equipment is in production, it'll tell you what it is. So it'd be the Mauser M1908. Basically, it'll say match the number here, but it is the basic infantry equipment. So if you click that line, you can then change that line. So mine would need upgrading for the better equipment. But the second I've clicked that, you can see the production efficiency of the item has gone down to its very base level straight away, and then needs to get better at making the new guns over time. Your army and air force will share military factories. You can just split them how you see fit, but your navy requires docks. Docks work in a similar way where you can set up production lines, but you will notice that they do not use production efficiency. Docks have got a flat output, which you can only change via research and decisions in other tabs, or you can put more docks per production line to output that production line faster. That should be enough to get you going on the production tab. The next tab that you should take a look at is the construction tab. This is where you physically make stuff on the map. In the construction tab, you should be able to see all of the different buildings that you can build in a state. Some of them are grey for now because you don't have the research to build them quite yet. For now, we're going to be taking a look at the civilian factory. If you click your civilian factory, you can then see all of the different states that you can build in. Each state has got a different maximum amount of buildings available per state. The one which says 8 out of 8 says it because when you start the game, you'll start with a certain amount of factories and such already built in that state. They've already built the maximum amount. The 0 out of 0 one is blue because you just can't build in that state, at least for now. You can improve how many buildings you can have in each state over time through different decisions and such, which I will explain later on in the guide. When you've got civilian factory selected, if you then click a state, it will build a civilian factory. I've clicked a state with multiple building slots available, so it's got a maximum of 5, 2 already built, so I can build as many as I want, up to 5, so 2 plus 3, 5, simple enough. You can also see it over here, it's building 3 civilian factories in that state. I currently have 12 factories available. Whenever you're building a building, it will use civilian factories to build that building. So the more civilian factories you've got, the better, because then you can build multiple lines at once. Just like production lines, it will queue them up. If I've got 45 civilian factories available, it will go 15 and 15, 15 and 15, 15 and 15. It will always go to the top lines available. You can just get as many civilian factories as you can, and it will produce more and more and more. If you have so many civilian factories available that you can produce multiple lines, you can then be producing military factories, civilian factories at the same time. Early game though, you tend to concentrate on civilian factories because then you're going to be able to build more of everything else over time towards the middle and late game. Civilian factories are also used to repair damaged factories. As war breaks out, you start bombing each other, stuff will need to be repaired. You can allocate factories or however many factories you want to concentrate on repairing, and your other factories will be used to just build stuff straight away. If you click your infrastructure button up here, you'll then notice you can see how much resources you've got being extracted from each state. Some states will produce steel, chromium, aluminium. If you left click the infrastructure on the button on the states with resources in them, you'll notice over the resources it extracts even more for having more infrastructure to then extract those resources. If you build military factories and docks, it will give you more available factories for your production tab, which we took a look at earlier. When you've got the technology, you can build synthetic refineries. Synthetic refineries produce oil. If you hover over your fuel tab here, you can see your daily gain, your base game, and your maximum capacity of what you can store. Oil's very important for your Navy and Air Force, also for anything like tanks and motorised infantry. So your fuel is split between all 3 of your armed forces, so you need to make sure you've got enough available. Just as it sounds, click it. Each one that you build will produce a certain amount of fuel. Your synthetic refineries can be improved through research so that they produce more and more fuel per refinery. You can also build fuel silos so you can improve your maximum amount of oil stored. So if you've got a massive army, massive navy, you go through your fuel really fast. If you're not producing enough, you need it ready for when you actually need it. If you click on your anti-air, you can build 5 anti-air per state. Anti-air should be fairly self-explanatory. You can also build multiple levels of airbase per state. The higher level an airbase you build, the more planes you can have in an airbase. When you get the technology, you can build radar stations. If you want to take control of the skies, you can detect planes incoming early. I believe you can have 5 levels of radar station per state again. You can build rocket sites later on in the game, but we are not going to be worried about that for now. You can build land and coastal forts. They should be self-explanatory again. The key difference is you can build them per province instead of per state, so each state might have several provinces in, and you can build quite a few in each one, whereas if you suddenly click your states, you could see how big each state is compared to a province. Supply is a big part of the game, so if you press F4 you can see your supply routes. Supply always starts off from your capital, and then it goes along your trains and through your convoy boats to wherever it needs to go. It'll go to your closest supply hub, so these here. If you click any supply hub, including your capital, you'll see it's got a little horse as standard. You can upgrade your supply by making it into trucks. You've got to produce your trucks from your production tab. When you click your trucks, you will notice under your supply, when you unpause it, your logistics fulfillment, it'll tell you how many trucks you need, how many trains you need to fulfill your supply needs. But we need to bear in mind under your construction tab, we can build railways. You can upgrade your railways so that they're more efficient. You can build extra supply hubs so that it's closer to the front lines. You can build extra naval bases. Naval bases have several levels per base. The higher level a naval base you produce, the more supply it can send to wherever it's going. Anything going overseas needs convoys. Convoys are also built via your docks. Docks and naval bases are very different. Docks are used to produce your ships. Naval bases are used to send supply elsewhere. Naval bases are also used for naval invasions when you get that far, and I'll explain that when I do my army tutorial. So all that's left on your construction tab is your facilities. You will see a naval facility, a plane facility, a land warfare facility. The Germans start with a land war facility. Somewhere up here you can apply a scientist for that facility. When you click it to start a project, this is not the same as research. This is a separate line of research than your research tab. I've only got one available at the minute, but more and more research options will become available on the facility depending on what technology you've researched on the research tab. But if you assign it and click start, it will then research whatever you've chose to research from that facility. You can see the facility on the map. You lose control of that facility on the map, the research stops, whereas your research on your other tab will just carry on going. So you need to make sure you build your facilities in a decent place. I believe the aerodynamics one, if you build that, that'll allow you to research radar, that sort of stuff. If you just have a play about with it, you'll see that they're well worth doing for each kind of naval unit, air unit, army units. I've never particularly gone into the nuclear research facility though. It is very late game. You just want to be concentrating particularly on your land warfare facility because your army is a large part of the game, and then your aerodynamics and your naval facility are a perk. Your Army, Air Force and Navy all have a doctrine, so if you open your Officer Corps tab, you can get to it via clicking these buttons, or when you're in game it will just pop up with its own button at the top to warn you that you've got some enough points to spend. So if you click into your one of your doctrines, this would be my army doctrine, it's just basically a choice of what route that you want to go. Do you want to go the artillery route? Do you want to go tanks and mobile warfare? Grand Battle Doctrine, which I believe is max entrenchment and sort of World War One with a little bit extra. Each doctrine has got its own benefits, its own downside. I would have a good read through each and every one if I was you, and pick what I personally favour, whatever playstyle I find most fun. Pick the doctrine to go along with it. Your big ones, if you're a small country and you're having manpower problems, if you find the doctrines which say recruitable population 5%, that's an easy way of getting more manpower for your armed forces, because manpower becomes a big bottleneck, particularly if you're playing the vanilla game with no mods, nothing like that. Manpower is an issue. The logistics tab is a handy one. Similar to the production tab, what we saw earlier, it'll tell you if you're in a deficit or surplus of what you're making at your docks and military factories. But with one added bonus, you can see if your deficit or surplus is getting worse day by day. So if you're in the red, you know, to spend more military factories on it, and if you're wildly into the green, then you possibly don't need to be spending as many military factories on whatever is into the green. The recruit and deploy tab is where you build your divisions. So you'll, depending on what country you are, you might not have this many divisions to pick from. You can train whatever divisions that you would like. You've got to set a location for it on core territory for it to pop on the map. When it's fully trained and fully supplied, it will just automatically deploy on where you've put, and it'll come up with the unassigned divisions button. You could train multiple divisions of the same units, and you can edit your units so that they've got more support units on the side, or a different kind of battle group to go with your unit. When you want to upgrade your division on your division designer, it costs army points. You can see your army points up here. That can be gained in two ways without going into too much detail. If you've got an army, you can do a battle drill exercise. Even as your army's just running exercises, practicing, it will slowly create army experience. Or your chief of army, whichever one you pick, I'll put 0.2 daily as an example for those, or 0.3. So you can also, on your recruit and deploy tab, decide your priority of where your equipment is going. So as you're producing guns, tanks, that sort of stuff, you can choose to set a high priority for reinforcement. So if you want to reinforce the units on the ground, so as they're in war and dying over time, you've obviously got to send fresh men with fresh guns. Do you want to send them to your men on the ground first, or do you want to send your new weapons and new men to fresh units so that you can then have new armies as your old armies are dying out? It's really situational, depending on if your army is holding quite well anyway and they've got a low priority and will hold. You can then open up multiple fronts on the war fronts. So it's all down to your personal preference again. Same for upgrades when you've researched more guns, planes, tanks, that sort of stuff. Do you want the new guns, tanks, and that sort of stuff going straight to your upgrades to the men on the field, or do you want the new tanks and such which you're producing going straight to the new units which are coming out on the field, which have been trained? Same for your supply trucks, so forth and so on as you're reading down the line. Supply trucks, garrisons. Do you want the new equipment and manpower going to the supply trucks, or do you just want it going to the units on the ground? If you click the trade tab, you can see all of your resources which you're gathering on the map. It also shows you them up here. Oil is an odd one. For some reason that doesn't tell you exactly how much you're gathering unless you click over your fuel tab, and then it'll explain it in daily consumption, fuel gain, blah blah blah. All of these aluminium, rubber, tungsten, steel, chromium, they basically, steel's used for practically everything. Chromium's used for boats with steel, rubber's used for planes, aluminium's used for planes, rubber's used for on your trucks, that sort of stuff. If you're looking at your production tab, it will tell you here what you're going to use to produce the item. So when you don't have enough for your production lines, it will go red. It will either slow production down if you're slightly out of supply. If you're massively out of supply, it will just stop production, and all of a sudden you won't be producing whatever you've got towards the end. So if I run out of steel, it's going to prioritize steel as always, top to bottom, infantry equipment, support equipment, towed artillery, and then all of a sudden by the time you get down to your trucks, there's no steel going towards trucks. So don't matter how many military factories you have got on that production line, because there's no steel to build them, so you can find that you're wasting 5 military factories on trucks when you don't have enough resources to actually build it with. If you find yourself in that position, just click whatever you happen to need, whatever's in the red. You want to do a trade for it. If you're in the red, it'll automatically set whatever you need factory-wise to cover your deficit. It'll just pop up with what you need. It'll cost, a civilian factory will cost 8 of whatever you're trading. So if I want 8 more steel, I'll set it to 1 civilian factory. Because I'm already in the surplus of steel, it's gone yellow because I don't need that trade, just as a warning as you're looking at a glance. But basically I now have 1 less civilian factory producing whatever I need because I'm trading, and then whoever you're trading with gets use of that civilian factory. So if you're trading with the German Reich, who are your enemy, the German Reich have now got 1 extra civilian factory to set up their economy. So when you're trading, make sure you trade with someone that you're not going to war with. The next thing I want to take a look at is your tabs up here. Political power is used to buy advisors and set policies for your government, which we shall take a look at in a minute. It will also be used to make decisions which just pop up throughout the game. Your political power is affected by your stability. The more stability you have, the more political power you have to make these decisions in the other tabs. Your stability is affected by the decisions that you make with your political power. It's also affected by how much of a hold your government has. So if you're 64% democratic and you've got a large part which is fascist to communist, you're going to be more unstable than if you've got 99% support for your government. Stability is going to affect how fast your military factories, docks and civilian factories work. You'll get a better output if you've got a more stable government. Your stability also affects your war support and vice versa. So if you're at war, your stability suddenly goes down by 27%, you're going to get a lot less out of your factories. So also your mobilization speed's minus 40%, so you're going to train your units 40% faster, and you're going to surrender a lot faster as your country starts to get taken over. So your war support is also really important, which can also be affected by decisions that you make and the stability of your government. And your manpower comes down to a few of the decisions which you can make, but largely comes down to how much of the map you control. Each state that you've got has got a manpower. If it's a core state, you'll get a lot more manpower out of core states than if it's a state which you've conquered. There are coring options, but if you're playing vanilla and you've got no mods, you don't tend to take over a lot of manpower and such from taking over states. So it largely comes down to decisions that you make give you more manpower. Now that you understand the basics of your economy and currencies, the decisions available on your National tab, Decisions tab and Research tab should be fairly self-explanatory. There's no point in taking you through them one by one, because it's best to pick the options that you prefer for your playstyle. If you've enjoyed the video, I'd appreciate a like or subscribe. The next one will be about the army function, so we'll be learning how to kick arse on land combat.